How does an LED work? So first of all, we have to learn this.
First, we must understand that inside materials we have energy levels. These are also called bands. In this diagram, we have 5 energy levels or 5 bands. As we go up from field to valence band to conduction band, the energy level is increasing. When we look at the 2 bottom rectangles, which are the bands that are labeled as filled, these are filled with electrons, and they have the least energy. When we go up to valence band from that filled, we are going up in energy, and as we can see is half blue and half red, meaning that it has a combination of electrons and holes. As we go up to conduction band, and as we go up in energy, we have mostly an empty energy level. And then if we go to even higher up than that, we have an empty band. The most important thing to note here is that the energy that is needed for an electron to go from, say, a filled band to a valence band, and then the energy needed for an electron to go from a valence band to a conduction band. Also, the opposite is required. For an electron to fall from a conduction band to a valence band, energy must be emitted.
The space between the band gaps is very important. Electrons cannot have energy that falls within those band gaps, meaning that if an electron does not have enough energy to go from a, let's say, valence band to a conduction band, it cannot make that progression up in energy.
If we have something like this, like in this diagram, as we can see there is a large concentration of energy bands in the middle, meaning that the band gaps between those bands are extremely small. This minimum space between the bands can lead to electrons being able to move from one band to another with minimum difficulty. With very small energy, they can go from the very bottom, such as from here, all the way to up here, because they don't need that much energy.
Now we can introduce the term electrical conductivity. Electrical conductivity is the ability for an electrical current to move through a material in a specified direction. Electron movement usually requires a temporary increase in the energy of the electron as it moves to an empty energy state. Having those definitions in mind, we could go back to the diagrams we showed earlier to try to make sense of how an LED could work.
If we go back to this diagram, and let's say we try to move an electron from this filled energy band all the way to an empty state over here, it would be very difficult for us to do that, as we can see that an electron would have to go to this energy band, and then to this energy band, and then to this energy band. It would be a lot easier to assume that electrons are mobile here in the valence band, as they are filled with holes and half filled with electrons. So valence bands are the only ones that participate in conduction, in electrical conduction. This is all overly simplified. However, in this diagram we have 2 energy bands. One is blue, which represents in this case a valence band. The other band is the red one, which in this case represents our conduction band. Those black circles represent electrons, and the white circles represent holes. If we want for an electron to move up from the valence band up to the conduction band, we would need to be able to have enough energy in that electron so that it can jump this band gap size. We can assume that if these bands are further and further apart, it would be harder, or the electrons would simply need a lot more energy to jump that band gap size. Now this whole video has been, as I already mentioned, overly simplified. But we can say that when an electron in the conduction band, like this black circle, drops into one of these holes, which is in the valence band, as it travels from this band to this band, it must make that jump, and it has to give off some energy that is being lost. As you can see, energy is increasing going up. But if it falls from here to here, that energy should be decreasing, and it must go somewhere. In this case, we can say that the energy can be given off as a photon.
So when that electron falls from the conduction band to the valence band, and that energy is given off as it makes that jump through the band gap size, we can say that that photon is creating light, or is emitting light. That's why it's called a light emitting diode. Now something super interesting is that the band gap, or the size of the drop that the electron is going through, can dictate the size of the wavelength of the light that is being emitted. So the bigger the drop, or the bigger the band gap size, means that more energy is being emitted, and it's kind of like the reciprocal. So more energy being emitted means that the wavelength is a lot smaller. As we change the size of this band gap, we can change the color of the light that is being emitted.
Here we have a diagram kind of summarizing what I just said, that as more energy is being emitted, the wavelength is decreasing. As we can see on the left hand side, where the gamma ray is, where the wavelengths are extremely small, but the energy is extremely high. If we want to create an LED, we want a material that has a band gap size between its valence band and its conduction band of the size that is respective to that wavelength that would give us visible light. And depending on the color that we want to emit, we would change that band gap size. Thank you for listening.